The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to Scary Stories with Kalila. I'm your host, Kalila Smith. Tonight we're going to delve into some really scary stories. I have one from my childhood, from way back when. But first I'm going to introduce my co-host. We have Allan Gilbreath and Lynda Salazar. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
So glad you guys are here with me.
So,
how y'all doing tonight? Good?
Doing good. Fantastic.
You got some scary stories?
I have many. I have one to bring from my childhood as well.
Yeah,
so
you have a plethora. So I think the theme tonight's going to be childhood stories, things that go bump in the night, and those scary things that we have underneath our beds. What about you, Allan? I don't think Allan ever had anything scary underneath his bed, except possibly that werewolf that bit him when he was a child. How you doing, Allan?
Well, back in my childhood, we had thatched mats, and we're in small tents. But it's.
I think Allan came from that family. He escaped the hills have eyes, and
he'll have a story. It'll be about a bat or a snake or a wolf or something. But he'll have a story. But
Love
first,
you, Allan.
This is a story that I want to share with you guys. And seriously, this is something that I've never told anybody. Like I never mentioned it. This story actually comes from before I could speak. Now, I'm not ashamed to say my age. I'm 62. So I was between 1 and 2 years old, maybe, because I was still in a crib and I was still at an age, I was sitting up. I was not an infant, but I was still at an age where I would have been rocked at night by my mother and given a bottle. So I was probably between 1.5 years, 2 years old, somewhere up in there. And I grew up out here in South Louisiana, in a raised old cottage. We didn't have air conditioning. So on summer nights, we would open up all the windows. All the windows would be open. And there was a lot of leaves outside. My yard had a very big yard. There was a lot of trees, a lot of leaves. And you would hear the leaves rustling at night with these critters crawling around the yard. So if I would look out the window at night, I would stand up on my crib and I could look out the window and I'd see these things running around in the yard, armadillos and possums, and when it would rain, there'd be snakes, there'd be eels. There was all kind of creepy stuff in my backyard. And, that was pretty scary as it was. But I will never forget this. It was a full moon. The blinds were open, the window was open, and I could see the moon from where I was sitting on my mother's lap. And suddenly I saw these little faces looking at me in the window. And it looked like the faces of little children, but they had like masks over their face. It looked like, I didn't know what it was back then, but if I had to describe it today, I have to say it would look like paper mache mask, if that makes sense. But it looks like the old-fashioned Halloween mask, but kind of a paper mache. Very, very creepy. And there was these little faces, and they were in the window, and they were doing this at me to come to them. And I got terrified, and I didn't really talk that well back then, so I put my hands over my eyes like this. I remember doing this and not wanting to look, and I would look again, and they would be there, and I kept my hands over my eyes, and I remember my mother saying, "She's afraid of the moon. She doesn't like the moon." And I kept thinking, it's not the moon. It's those faces in the windows. And I couldn't verbalize it because I was too young, but I will never forget how terrifying that was. And again, it was terrifying because it's true. It doesn't sound like a big elaborate, with a big plot, but it's terrifying because it's true. And we always hear about children who see things when they're little and nobody believes them. But I saw this terrifying thing. And to this day, I don't know what it was. As a child, I would sometimes every now and then maybe mention it to a friend, and I'd say, "Did you ever see those faces in the windows?" And of course, people always looked at me like I was crazy. Would say, "No, what faces?" And my mother would say things like, she has imaginary friends. And I'm thinking to myself, they're not friends. They are not friends.
Mm.
And to this day, I do not know what those things were in the window and why they were there. Now, the strange thing is, a lot of people would say, because even as I got older, I started trying to rationalize it. Well, maybe it was Halloween time, and maybe it was little children with masks on, and maybe they were playing a trick and they were looking through the window. But taking into consideration that I was in a raised cottage that was up off of the ground, so in order to look through a window at my house, in one of these houses, an adult would have to stand on a ladder. It would be not quite a second story, but kind of in between a first and second story.
Yeah, because they're
The way
raised.
these raised houses are, those old raised houses.
Yeah.
And so there was never an explanation for this. But I do have to say, and I'm feel kind of silly admitting it, even to this day, I don't open up the blinds at night and look out the window, because to this day, I'm afraid of what might be out there looking back at me.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's just, I still, when I go to look out the window at night, I get that chill up the back. And I live out in the swamp still. To this day, I live out in the swamp. So I have critters. I will hear things rustling around. I will not go in the backyard to check on the pool. I do not go outside in the backyard for anything once it gets dark, because I'm afraid of what might be out there as far as animals. But, you know, I have those owls, those screech owls that screech at night. And you'll hear them screaming out there, and I want to look out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I go to raise that blind, I get that chill. And I can't do it.
And you just can't do it.
Just
You
can't do
do
it.
not want to see what's outside.
So I don't know. I would love to know if anybody out there ever has had this type of an experience where they saw something like that from their childhood, and because 60 years later, I can't explain it.
Do you have an adult corollary to go with it? Have you had another experience like that?
Very similar, Alan. Very similar. But I don't think that was anything meant to scare me. I think because when it happened, it frightened me at the time. But it was after my daughter passed away, as a matter of fact. I was getting a lot of signs from her at the time, and I didn't recognize them as signs. For instance, I was working on a book at the time about her, and there was a neighborhood cat that I recognized for being the neighbors a couple of doors down, and the cat was on the window right at my computer and was trying to claw its way through my screen. And I thought, why is that cat here? Do those people move and the cat's hungry, or what is up with that cat? The cat's never acknowledged me before. Why suddenly is this cat coming at me? And I ignored it. It eventually went away, but I thought later, well, maybe that was a sign. Maybe that was a sign from her. But when I was growing up out in the middle of the swamps, one of the things that my brother introduced me to was tree frogs. And when my brother was much older than me, and he would get me a little bucket, and he would take me tree frog hunting. We'd go out in the yard, and he would call them. And he'd teach me to call them and make the sound like a tree frog. And it sounds silly, but that's what I did. I would catch tree frogs. So after my brother passed away, I started seeing a lot of tree frogs all the time. So anyway, if you know what a tree frog sounds like, Alan does, I know, because he's from Texas. Well, you're from Texas. You know what they sound like, those green tree frogs. Yeah. They have a very distinct sound. But I was home one night, and I had some friends here staying with me. And this was like a couple of days after she passed. And I was sitting in the computer, and once again, it was very quiet in the house. And all of a sudden, at the front door, I heard what sounded like a tree frog, only it was intensely loud. It was like a roar. And my heart I got that chill, and it was like, what if that's a sign? Because it sounds like a giant tree frog. And I couldn't bring myself to look out there to see what it was. So, seems kind of silly, and to a lot of people, they might be going, wait, this isn't a scary story. But actually it is. It is, because if you know what that feeling's like when you don't want to look out that window and see what's out there because you're afraid of what's going to be out there looking back at you, it's pretty intense. So that's my start off scary story for the evening.
Well, I mean, I can relate to that, because growing up, you know, and first of all, tree frogs, around here, they're, I was looking at the tree frogs, and they're small. They're not that big, but they make really loud noises. I mean, you
Yeah,
can
they're
hear
loud.
them. They're
Here
very
we
loud.
have them. They're big. They're like this big. They're like this
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
And
They're
so,
just, and the thing about looking out the window, that's always been something of creep factor for me. Even as a child, I never wanted to look out the window. Even as an adult now, there's times I don't want to look out the window, but I do look out the window because I guess I am my mom's daughter. I have to find out what's going on outside. I have to beat the fear. But I had that incident happen one time when I was like a teenager. I want to say I was probably 12 going on 13. And we were seeing, famous cable coming out. And I can even tell you the name of the movie that was on, that was finishing up. And it was the one with Melanie Griffin, Working Girl. I think it was called Working Girl. That was on, and it was ending. And the funny thing is, it was ending. It was so weird. My sister and cousin were in the back room, and my sister was doing a essay for her college because she was getting her master's in psychology. And so my cousin was a typist, and so she was typing out what my sister needed. And they were in the back, and my mom was watching TV with me because there was a scary movie was going to come on. And so I was waiting for that show to finish. And I remember right at midnight, it was like it had just finished, and the movie was about to start, the famous HBO dun, dun, where it's going through the whole little, how they used to do it so loud. Very 80s. All of a sudden, I hear someone yelling, and they're yelling, saying, "Go away, leave me alone, stay away," and saying that they had a knife, and they were coming to our door banging hard. Now, I'm from a small town. Things like that don't ever happen. Everybody knows everybody. You don't have that happening. And what's so odd about that is that I saw a lady with a little boy. And I would say the little boy was probably 6 years old, running with her, coming to our door, banging, banging. And my mom doesn't hear it. And I'm like, Mom. And my mom is a light sleeper. And I was surprised that she didn't hear it, but it scared me. And I had to look out the window, and I'm like, Mom, And my mom finally wakes up, and she realizes that, well, when she looks out the window, her and I are both looking out the window. I'm looking out a certain part of the window, and she's looking out the door diamond window. We had one of those doors. And she sees a lady carrying a baby. I don't see a baby. I only see a lady with a child. My mom, being brave, she's like, somebody's in danger. She opens the door, and there's nothing. Like, I take a look away to look at my mom, like, don't open the door, because I was really scared. I mean, that was scary. Like, you don't open the door, and and then I'm getting ready to see scary movies, and it was always about Friday the 13th and all that good stuff. So it's like, oh my God, what if? And the thing is, when they opened up the door, my mom opened up the door. My sister and cousin heard the racket, and they heard me and my mom and me tell my mom, don't open the door. My mom opens the door, and there's nobody. And I'm like, where did they go? And my mom and cousin literally went outside, and they walked around the house. One went on this side, and the other one, and they walked around and met each other.
I've never done that. No.
I couldn't do it. But that's just the way. One, my cousin was studying to be a mortician. So for her, it was no fear. My mom was a nurse. So, she grew up out in the ranch and everything. And so things like this was like, okay, well, let me see what's going on.
Okay.
Ladies with no fear. But for me, I was like, oh my God, and to this day, I sometimes have that fear of looking out because I'm afraid, what am I going to see out there? But
I know. Yeah.
I have my mom's strength to say, you sometimes have to figure it out and be ready for anything.
I'm not ready for
Well,
those
I
little
tell you
paper
what.
mache faces to come back at me. That was horrifying.
Now that's a little creepy.
I don't ever want to see those things again. I don't know what they were, but they were.
Well, we'll dive into more about faces in the dark after we come back from this break.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour. A tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN. And it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about. The Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spookhouse. This is real.
We're back. Now, come on, Allan. You had to have something weird looking through a window at you at some time. Come on. I can't imagine that didn't happen.
I know, Allan, you've had to have something.
Come on, you're from Texas. You know there was something weird out there looking in the window at you.
Well, the interesting thing about things that go bump in the night is, occasionally there are a few of us that like to bump back. So, the worst thing is, of course, anything that you don't know. That is always just the scariest thing in the world. And I grew up, of course, in South Houston, and a rural area. The suburbs and stuff like that were just getting started. But you didn't live far. As a matter of fact, we were probably 8 houses down from a drainage area that went into the Buffalo Bayou. So we just right there at the end of the street was, when you're a small child, it was like being Tarzan, because you could literally walk right off into the bayou 6 doors down from your house, which meant anything that traveled up and down the bayou could show up at your house.
That's usually how that works, yes.
Whether it was really large snakes, the occasional alligator, the, turtles. I distinctly remember the first time I discovered a mud puppy. For those who don't know what a mud puppy is,
I know what it is.
A mud puppy is a very large salamander that looks a lot like an eel, with the little frilly things on the side of his head right there.
No.
And but they get rather large. They're not a small they're not a small animal. When these things show up, they're big.
Yes,
So,
they are, especially if you're little. We had those in the yard.
Yeah.
Especially when you're 3 or 4 years old and you're not much bigger than it. And of course, you're down playing in the water. You got your little net. You're dipping, chasing minnows and that kind of stuff. And you don't really see one of these things first. And then you kind of scoop it and net it, and it comes up out of the net like, a giant moray eel, mouth agape, And, at this point, you have netted the Loch Ness Monster when you're 3 years old. It's funny now, but when you're 3 or 4, you've never seen one before. You don't know what it is.
I know. I saw one. And I had a brother 20 years older than me that told me, come see the puppy. Well, as you know my personality very well, Kalila, you can imagine what happened next. The poor creature got drugged home because I was going to show this thing to somebody.
Somebody was going to tell you what it was.
Yes. And, of course, the first normally female person you walk up to and you go, hey, look at this thing. You're going to get some screams. And you probably psychologically damaged a neighbor for the rest of her life.
Yeah, you were that kid.
And then that's where it began for him.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it only got worse.
Well, and just to tell you, how disturbing a childhood can be. In the little area we had an empty lot next door to our house, and it would always flood. So there would be this standing pond of water next door all summer. So you didn't even have to go to the bayou delivered. So whatever, you just walked over there and played around and, played in the little portable swamp.
Yeah.
And at night we would get a lot of bats.
Why am I not surprised?
And, they would be sweeping back and forth between the properties, and you could see them flying and dipping and coming down. And you have to have an unusual father to teach you this. But, we discovered that a plastic spoon and a new product that had just come out back then was like something called tender victuals. It was like a soft cat food. And you could get out there with a plastic spoon and a victual, and you could launch it into the air high enough that you could feed the bats.
Oh. Mm-mm. No.
Now, you can see how this story can go one of two directions. If you're the one with the plastic spoon, it's a lot of fun. If you're anybody else with common sense walking out there, getting yourself dive bombed by bats was probably not your idea of a happy evening. Lynda has the look of no.
Yeah, I say the same thing. Absolutely not. But
let me put it this way.
The question still remains: did anything scare you as a child? Like supernatural? Was there a monster in the closet? Was there something under the bed besides a captive mud puppy, or was there something in the window, the alien children in the window coming to get you and bring you to the mothership? I mean, did you have anything weird other than, what obviously you had?
The worst thing being in a semi-rural area like that was anything that you didn't expect. So you would be working around the patio or playing around the patio, and you would scare something up. And probably the worst thing to disturb ever was like a cottontail rabbit, because they would hide in the monkey grass and they would not move. They would not budge. You could be cutting the yard, you could be doing stuff until you actually uncovered one. And then it would come blowing out of there at about 300 miles an hour. And, it's a heart-stopping thing. It would scare you, the dog, the cat, the neighbor, just suddenly. And if there was more than one, it looked like an explosion of something. Suddenly there are little furred creatures flying up out of behind this bush. And, of course, all you're doing is staggering backwards, trying to get your eyes to focus to see what the heck these things are. So, kind of welcome to the surprise of living, semi-rural, especially back then. And, in the terror department, I get to look at Lynda and say, all right, Lynda, as a kid, do you remember those wasps called cicada killers?
Yes, I do.
Yes, notice she leans back in terror. Because the world has warmed up, they've actually moved as far north as Memphis. So I'm having to explain to poor Tennesseans what this 3-inch long armed helicopter is when it goes flying around their backyard in a search pattern. Because they're big, they're huge, they're like 3 inches long, they're black and gold, they're actually a very beautiful insect, but it's monstrous. It's this giant wasp. And the bad part is they don't care about humans. They could care less. If you are in the flight plan, you could get bumped. I'm not making this up. Lynda's like, if you happen to be in their way, they don't care.
Mm-mm.
They will fly up to you and sit there hovering until you move. And then they'll fly by. And as I tell everybody, this is an insect that is never going to hurt you. It will, however, make you hurt yourself. Because you have a giant 3-inch wasp flying at your face. And, you know, again, these are a tunneling insect also. So they live in little burrows on the ground. So you're out playing. Again, go back to being 3 or 4 years old. You're playing, the ball rolls over under the tree. You run under the tree, and 5 or 6 giant 3-inch wasps all pop up out of the ground to see what you're doing. It has a tendency to motivate you to go somewhere else other than being under that tree. They will motivate you quickly. They don't try to scare you. You know, they're not trying to sting you. I mean, they're not jerks like red wasp and yellow jackets and brown wasp who just sting you for the pleasure of it. They do not want to sting you. They want nothing to do with you, but they also don't want you hanging around their house.
Exactly.
And the thing is, they pop up out of the ground. So again, you're minding your own business, doing your own thing, and suddenly you hear as these things rise up, at which point in time we'd have to go catch Kalila because she would vacate the area immediately.
Oh, absolutely. There's no way. There's just no way.
I'm just going to say,
I can certainly see with that as a childhood, is that being your scariest experience. I got it. I get it now. I get it now how you turned into the skeptic that you are.
Well, you know, the trick is something went bump in the night. You went and looked until you found out what went bump.
And with you, it was always an animal. But that's the first thing your mind goes to. It goes to the animal. See, the first thing my mind goes to is some freakish, demonic little children with really scary mask-like faces coming through the window, beckoning me to come out to play with them. I mean...
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm trying to figure out is you never heard any, because I know in Houston area, there's a lot of old folklores. There's also a lot of neighborhoods where they claim poltergeists happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even places where they say is most haunted, like park and stuff that happens all the time.
Yes. Herman County is renowned with that.
You never went to go experience that and had an experience, Allan? Like something that, yes, it made you the skeptic, but you also understand that there are some truth to it. I mean, I know that nobody can be 100% skeptic. I just know nobody can be 100% skeptic.
Well, that's because you don't know Allan very well. But anyway,
I believe Allan is hiding a secret, and he has to keep himself as 100% skeptic.
Hiding some secrets, all right. But I don't know if any of
he's had an experience.
Supernatural, but
I don't know, Kalila. I think he had an experience.
Growing up, realizing that I'm a psychic, I'm a medium, and it all kind of connected the dots for me because I saw things all the time in my house. I didn't see scary faces, but I saw people walking around. I saw little children walking around my bedroom late at night. It's really funny because lately we were talking about reptilians. We were kind of making jokes about, there's this prior, thing about some people being reptilian, and we don't judge, but we posted it. And
I
it was
remember
kind of
when the movie
amusing.
V came out.
Oh, well, there you go. But, it really brought my mind back because I can remember, again, as a small child, I remember seeing this very reptilian thing just walking down the hallway. And it was dark, it was at night, and it was just the shadow of this thing. And it was huge. It was bigger than the adults in my house. It was much used. We had high ceilings because it was an old house. So, this thing, was probably 7-8 feet tall, maybe, compared to the people I was in the house with. But the striking thing about it is that when it walked down the hallway past the den where I was, I'll never forget there was this long tail coming off of it.
And when we come back, we'll find out more about Kalila's reptile person.
Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after-death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith. We're back. And, like those kids in the window, I never found out what that reptilian thing was going down the hallway. But when I see those
Did you
things,
actually hear it or just see it?
I just saw it. I didn't hear anything. I was a little kid. I'm playing in this little room it wasn't really the living room. It was like a little den. It was on the other side of the hallway was my bedroom. And I'm playing in this little room, and I hear someone coming down the hall, and I look up, and there's this thing, and it's just a shadow. And I just stood there, and I watched it, and it didn't seem to be aware of me. It just walked past. And the striking thing about it was that after it passed, it had this long tail that seemed to take forever to go past the threshold of the door. And I just looked at it, and, again, nobody believed me. And nobody else I know ever saw anything like it. And, my mother, who was, the traditional Catholic mother, she told me it was the devil. It was the devil coming to get me because I was bad.
Oh, well, of course. Who else would it be?
What else would it be, right? So we had to put more pictures.
I grew up with a West Texas adventurer for a father. You grew up with somebody going, and the devil visited you.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly.
You can see the difference in the point of views.
Right. Well, yeah, there was a lot of that. So I never found out what it is, but I have to tell you, even though I don't succumb to conspiracy theories, when I see some of these videos about the people who could be reptilian, sometimes I do see the resemblance. I just have to say that. I do have to say that. A little scary. So Lynda, why don't you tell us?
Don't worry about it. They're all in politics now. So
well, see, there you go. That's okay. They don't care about me. Lynda, I know you had a lot of scary stuff, because I know in the seance room we've talked about this before. Some of those scary tales that come from your hometown in Texas. Why don't you tell us one of the scarier ones that little kids feared?
Oh my God! Well, it's funny because I wanted to talk about el mano, which is the hand, right? But with the tail, the reptile thing that you saw, which we've been seeing everywhere, growing up, we were pretty much, the reason we got the mano was because of the fact that if you talked back to your parents or you hit them when you weren't supposed to, when little kids do that, you didn't do that, because then you were told that the mano was going to come and get you, that was the hand of the of the kukui. It was going to come and get you at night. It was going to come.
The kukui. What is the kukui? Tell everybody what the kukui is.
The kukui. The kukui. The kukui is the boogeyman, or whatever it may be, the monster in the closet. That is the kukui, or anything that you're not able to know what it is, the mysterious thing of it. That is what's known as the kukui. So,
and he had a detachable hand. The hand came off and would chase you around at night.
Yeah, it would. We were told by our grandparents and our aunts and uncles and anybody in the family, you disobeyed, Emano was going to come and get you. And that was the thing. Let me tell you, we didn't disobey. And when you did that one little, trying to pretend you were going to hit, let me tell you, you didn't do anything, because as soon as you saw that eye rise and they say, el cucuy, emano, you were like, that hand's going to come again. And the hand could be under the bed. It could come
See,
uh,
that's
out
where
of
my
the
brain would have gone there. Under the bed, you get up to go to the bathroom at night, you step down, that thing grabs you, yanks you under the bed, and that's it. That's where
yeah,
my mind would go. Yeah,
and
definitely.
so yeah, and that is what for the longest time when you see those movies and you see where you're scared to look under the bed or scared to it's you're I'm people are thinking about the clown, or I'm thinking about the hand. I was telling Alan that there had to have been something that scared him, that they had to give him a story, and I said they didn't threaten him with the kitty food for the bats to go at him.
Well, and as we discussed off air, um, your parents would look at you and they would throw you the bone of one of their old stories. Don't look in that box. That's mommy's sewing stuff. If you open that box, the LaRue will get you. Okay, well, that's cool. Well,
What's the LaRue? Is that like
when you're
LaRue?
3 or 4 years old and you want to know what the LaRue is, you go in there when nobody's looking. You
And
open
you
the
open
box,
Well, did you ever see one?
and the LaRue doesn't show up. So now I'm really disappointed.
So
It's
you
like the
never got to
kukui.
see a LaRue.
Yeah,
Never got
welcome to
see
me.
a LaRue.
Welcome to me. Becoming a skeptic and a ghost hunter
There,
and a cryptid
there,
hunter.
there it is. That's where it
You know,
happened.
it's
You never got to see the
I,
LaRue.
I got told you open the box, it pops out. Okay, open the box. It didn't pop out.
Alan the Rebel.
This is where it all started. He got traumatized as a child by not seeing something that scared the hell out
That's
of him.
exactly.
There you go. That's how the
the
skeptic
lack
becomes.
thereof of a critter. If you open that, if you touch that pie safe, your great aunt, uncle, so and so is going to come back to haunt you. Well, that's kind of cool. You get the camera, you set it up, 2:00 in the morning, you go in there and you touch the pie safe all over, and grand aunt so and so doesn't bother to make an appearance. You get disappointed. You thought, wow, if it's that easy to conjure one up, let's go get her.
See, I already had those people in my room already. Those people were already around. I was already seeing them at night.
Well,
I was
yeah,
just
you'd already
afraid
been
one of them was going to be
psychologically
under the bed and grab my
traumatized.
foot.
Oh no,
They were
that
getting
was the
your
lizard going
attention.
down the hall with good lighting. No, the devil was here for you. No, I can't imagine what was wrong with you.
Well, you're so nonchalant calling a lizard going down the hallway. The lizard was like 10 feet tall. I mean, that wouldn't
Hey,
like shock you a little bit?
it's like
It was
Hollywood. It's
Godzilla
all
going
about the
down
lighting.
What's that?
It's all about the lighting. It's all about the lighting.
Well, when
You
you're a
know
little
that.
kid and it looks like Godzilla going down the hall. I mean, it's like,
Well,
that's kind of
okay.
frightening.
Well,
It
let's
stays
take your.
with you. Let's put it that way. It stays with you. And I'm
Oh
sure it
yeah.
didn't help that I watched, even as a small child, my father had me watching Twilight Zone and Hammer
Oh
movies.
no, that
Oh,
didn't.
yeah.
That didn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure that didn't help, but still, it stays
My
with
favorite
you.
thing was the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau. So, I was not watching Rod Serling. I didn't rediscover him until I was a teenager.
No, I was watching him at like 2.
Well,
And then there
now,
was this other one with Boris Karloff in it that was
Mhm.
really scary. I watched that one. Thriller. I would watch
oh
that.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
and they
My
had the
father
dark
liked all that kind
side,
of
and they
stuff.
had all kinds of cool shows.
Yeah.
Um,
My
Those
dad
are the
liked all
shows
this
you would
stuff.
stay up to watch, and those are the ones that would get you wanting to, those are the ones that your parents would show you. Those were like the beginner.
Well, I mean, one of my earliest television memories is I grew up in the basically immigrant district of Houston, where they were building the Alaskan pipeline. So there were a lot of Scottish and a lot of British people, a lot of Irish people, all in this particular part of town, snugged up to the Chinatown. So here we are, and everybody's got an accent, and everybody's from someplace else. And the local K&O station, catering to the wants of many of the people in the area, began carrying a very interesting show called Monty Python's Flying Circus. Now, you can picture the effect of that show on a small mind.
It just explains so much about you, Allan. It really does.
It does.
It definitely explains. Now I understand so much more about him,
It's, there's a fear gene somewhere in there. And I will freely admit, I can be surprised. Something can jump out of the box. Something can fall out of the closet. Something can surprise me. But, now if I'm trapped in a room with a lion, yeah, we're probably going to be a little scared. If I'm outside the room and I know the lion's inside the room and I have the catch pole, it's a fair fight. So, this is why I approach the paranormal like I approach pretty much anything else. It's kind of like, okay, well, if they say if I touch the door, it's going to pop out. Let's go ahead and get it to pop on out. Come on. And it doesn't pop out. What can I say?
Allan is the Crocodile Dundee of
Texas.
The paranormal.
The paranormal. He really is. He really is. But I'll tell you the difference in that, Allan, is like Allan uses the analogy of, well, if I'm in a room with a lion. See, where I grew up, ironically enough, a guy around the block, and it was kind of a semi-suburban neighborhood. I mean, kind of rurally, but the man right around the block. So when, like, my bedroom was here and the people behind me, their house is here, and then across the street, there's this guy, and guess what he has for a pet? A lion.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually grew up with the windows open and at night hearing the lion roar. And we would be looking
and people wondered why as a small child you saw things. I can't imagine.
You would hear the lion roar, and we'd walk around the block. We'd walk around the block to go see what that is, and we would see the lion in the driveway. He had just a 4-foot fence, and the lion is in the driveway in this big cage thing. And all the little kids would go, and we'd be looking at the lion, and my parents would tell me, don't go back around there. Those lions eat little children. So you're laying in bed, and you're hearing the lion roar coming from right behind, your house.
Mm-hmm. And it's hungry.
3 feet away, and it's hungry,
yeah.
and it's nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, do you blame me for not wanting to go out in the backyard now? I mean, it's like I grew up with a lion right around the block that eats little children. So, I mean...
I forgot that story.
That is the scary story. You could be taking a walk around the block.
And the lion could get you. It really is. It was scary. So, that there were some scary things out there,
Here's my lion true story for you. You ready? And then we'll take a break and be back. But my lion true story is myself and another gentleman were visiting a wildlife broker. People that sell exotic animals to zoos and that kind of stuff. And we are walking by a very tall fence with a lot of bamboo on it. What we do not know is that there's a very large African lion, a male, on the other side of that fence in the bamboo. So we're walking down this long fence. And as we come around the corner, you round the corner to where there's no more bamboo. There's just fence. And as we round that corner, I'm walking to the outside. The gentleman with me is walking on the inside. We turn the corner, and the lion is right there and goes, oof. Yeah. And the gentleman with me passes out. Just blam, hits the ground, stiff as a 2x4. And I swear the lion smiled.
I'm sorry, Allan. You always have the most unusual stories.
It's amusing. It's entertaining. But there's nothing paranormal.
This gentleman was probably in therapy the rest of his life.
He probably is, and he's probably afraid every time he thinks about a lion or sees one. But,
I'm thinking every time he hears a loud cough, he dives for cover. It didn't roar at us. It just kind of made this lion barking sound. Just oof. And
are you sure it wasn't just a big dog? Lions.
No, this was a very large African lion.
The lion makes that sound.
I
think
think
Yes,
it
they
does.
do.
I don't
They
think
make
it
a
does.
loud cough sound.
Did you ever see that picture of the dog with like the lion
Yeah.
lion costume
Yeah,
on it? You sure
yeah.
it wasn't that?
No,
I think it was
no.
that, Alan. I really do. I think it was
All
that.
right.
We're
We're
gonna
going
take
to
a break.
take a break. We're going to take a break, and we'll come right back as they harangue me about my misidentification of a lion.
Follow me, Kalila Smith, into the mysterious world of spirits. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, is a concise how-to manual for anyone who enjoys a good ghost hunt. Learn the history of spiritualism, learn what a ghost is and what is not. Learn the truth about poltergeist. We'll also delve into the realm of spiritual beings that never were human, the world of demons, real vampires, and we'll look at some real case studies. This is a must-have for everyone interested in ghost hunting, from the novice to the expert. Completely updated in its second edition, this is one of the first guides for ghost hunting based on actual first-hand experiences. Available on Amazon.com. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, by Kalila Smith. All right, and we are back. And Alan, I'm still not convinced. I mean, are you sure this wasn't a chow with a wig on? I mean, come on.
If a chow is 5 foot tall and weighs 500 pounds, it was a chow.
So this was a neighborhood. Was this a neighborhood that you were in?
No. This was actually a farm. This was an animal broker.
What are you, hanging out with a Tiger King? I mean, come on.
Well, we were there to pick up an emu.
Butterbump. And it could happen. It could happen.
Oh,
and
my
they do
God.
have emu farms, so there we go. But anyway,
they have emus. All right. You want something really scary? Back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a fad of alternative meat, and people began raising emus and ostriches
I remember that,
as a red meat substitute.
Wouldn't
So
it
a
be
lot
white
of people.
meat since they're birds? I mean, wouldn't they be kind of like a?
No, it's a red meat. It is a very, very lean red meat. It's quite tasty, as a matter of fact.
Doesn't taste like chicken, though.
No, it does not taste like chicken. It tastes a little bit like a cross between lamb or goat and cow, but it's very, very, very lean.
Interesting.
So,
no, I never had that, but I do know that there was a lot of people here on the North Shore that had.
And what did they do with them after they
ostriches.
couldn't sell them?
What do they do with them after they sell them?
Well, what happened when they couldn't sell them? What do they do with them?
I don't know. Let them loose
A
in the
lot of
swamp?
people just turned them loose.
Okay. All
and
right.
they escaped.
Now that leads me to my swamp monster story.
Yes, it does.
Because at the time, this is before the internet, and at the time, a lot of people thought that maybe that's what I saw was an ostrich or an emu, but I know that it wasn't. This was this was in the early 90s. It was the early to mid 90s. It was before we had internet. There was no internet yet. And I was coming home from a house party, and I'll never forget this. It was February. It was in Picayune, Mississippi.
Been there many times.
You know where Picayune is?
I have.
So
I do.
It's north of, for those who don't know, it's north of New Orleans, northeast of New Orleans, and about 2 hours away, maybe hour and a half away. And it was late at night. It was between 12 and midnight and 1 a.m. And it was February. It was very, very foggy. It was an extremely foggy night. And I drove a minivan. I was driving a minivan back then. And I was driving down this foggy interstate, going 70 miles an hour. Not a lot of traffic out that time in the morning in Picayune, Mississippi. And the fog was so thick, you could not see beyond where your low beam lights were. Now, suddenly, I come past something. Now, you got to realize, you're in a van, so as your lights are hitting it, you can see those little lines on next to you in the lane. I was in the far right lane. I had just passed an exit that said next exit 5 miles, because I was getting ready to enter into what's called the Honey Island Swamp, biggest swamp down here, and the home of the legendary honey swamp monster. Now, I had heard about this my whole life, and people always said that there was a swamp monster out there. And in Louisiana, your swamp monster was, kind of like a Bigfoot creature. So I'm traveling down this road, and suddenly I practically sideswipe something that is standing, like the 2 feet standing right over that dotted line. And I'm in a van, and this thing was so tall, all I saw were the legs. So whatever it was taller than my van was. And I go past it 70 miles an hour, and I'm like, what in the, and I look in the rearview mirror, and all I see is darkness. And suddenly I get that smell, that wet dog smell that people say they smell when they encounter these kind of creatures. And I smell that smell. And of course, my first impulse is, I got to go back. I got to turn around and go back and see what that was. And then I realized there's not another exit for 5 miles. If I get 5 miles down the road, come back, go another 5 miles, make a U-turn and come back up. What if I'm driving down the road and I hit it? Then what? Or what if it's not there? And it was really strange. I'll never forget this thing. The legs were fuzzy. And the only way I can describe these legs were it was a light color. It was not brown, like traditionally you see people talk about the Bigfoot, it's brown. This looked like dirty lamb's wool. It was kind of not really white, but a kind of a grayish white. And it looked like sticks and leaves and all kind of stuff in it. It was dirty looking, looked like a dirty lamb's wool kind of thing. So it was definitely fuzzy. There was definitely fur on it. And all I saw were the 2 legs. And you talk about a strange feeling when you were on the highway out there, you don't know what in the world you went by. And you've heard rumors of this monster out there, this Bigfoot thing. And the only thing, it was like, okay, well, this fits the description of everything I've heard of when people see this thing. Because in the 70s, there was some guy that had lived out there, and he had the footprints of it. And, this was a big deal down here. So, but unfortunately, it was before the internet, so I had no way of really researching it. The next day, I called a couple of swamp tour companies out there, and, nobody took me seriously. And, and I came home.
They looked at you as the crazy lady, huh?
Well, I've been the crazy lady since I'm 2 years old, so I mean, it was nothing new. But I told my husband about it. I got home and I told my husband about it. I was like, I can't believe what it was, and he's like, it was a cow. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It was like 2 fuzzy legs, And then it turned out it was an emu. Well, no, it wouldn't be big enough for an emu. Well, it was an ostrich. I was like, okay, no, you're not hearing me. Ostriches don't have fur, and their legs are not covered in like lamb's wool. And to this day, once again, like the faces in the window, to this day, I don't know what I saw. And I'm not a big believer in the Bigfoot thing because nobody's ever produced one, but I gotta tell you, I don't know what that was. Now, of course, my husband said it was a bear, and it was like, well, it would have had to have been a polar bear for it to be here because we don't have light-colored bears here. So, that was a terrifying feeling, is that when you're out on the highway and you come face to face with something and you cannot identify what it is. And again, to this day, I've never been able to identify what it was, but I did see something very close to it out here, close to my home in the Manchac Swamp one night on a boat tour. And we shined a light on something, and we saw just the head coming up out of the water, same color. It was just a head, and it was traveling across the bayou. And the captain looked at it, and he said, "What is that?" And I looked back at him, and I said, "You don't know?" And he said, "No."
Wait a minute, Captain, you're supposed to be the expert here. Yeah.
Right. Well, he's saying you're supposed to be the expert, lady. Okay, you're the paranormal lady. You're supposed to be the expert. So, long story short, we pulled the boat over. We had a boat full of Girl Scouts, no less, and they were shining the lights everywhere. We see this thing, and we don't want to alert the children that we just saw something we can't identify. And it was really scary. So he pulls the boat over, and
you're about to get your Sasquatch merit badge. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? And he's like, "I don't know what it was." And I said, "Have you seen anything like that before?" He says, "No," but he says, "But I'll tell you what's strange." And I said, "What?" He says, "There was no wake." said, what do you mean there was no wake? And he says, well, you know, when something swims across the bayou, there's a wake. You see the little ripples of water behind it. And he says, there was no wake. And I said, okay, enlighten me here, because I don't know what that means. He says, the bayou's about 9 feet deep. He says, whatever it was walking on the bottom. So, I don't know. Are there swamp creatures out here in Louisiana? Maybe.
Well, it's an absolute given fact that there are swamp creatures. It is a matter of debate as to what you saw.
God, stop it. Well, it wasn't an emu. I will tell you.
No, it was not an emu or an ostrich.
It was not an emu. It was nothing. It was not a reptile. It was not a bird. It was a mammal. And whatever it was walking in a bayou that was not at least 9 feet deep, and the water, the head was sticking up. So how big of a creature would that have to be? Probably about the same size as the one I sideswiped in the van. And it's just bizarre because I can never find anybody else who has these experiences, who have actually seen these things. But I know what I saw. I know what I saw, and I know what I smelled in the case with the driving past the thing. And it was unmistakable. It really was.
Well, you know, that's like us going down I-10 coming back from Vegas, driving between El Paso and San Antonio. And there is, if anybody's taken that drive, you all know that is the longest drive, and there is nothing out there. And we happened to stop at a gas station, and the gas station was like one of those little creepy gas stations. You have to, you know, we put gas, we did what we had to do, get in. It just was like one of those creepy things where you just don't know. But we were driving down the road, you know, we picked up speed and we were heading back to San Antonio. And I'm not a big believer of Bigfoot or anything of that nature as well. But let me tell you, we encountered something strange that just went running straight across on the highway as well. And at one moment. Sorry, I had the twins today.
I think she's being invaded by elves.
That's okay. It's the little children with the faces in the mirror. And
they are. But out of nowhere, it looked like a silverback gorilla. That's all I can say is it was tall, but it was walking like a human, but then it did a squat in the middle of the medium of the road. And we all just freaked out, and we looked at the rear mirror and we could see it just going into the dark. We wanted so bad to do a Yui, and because my mom and Victor and I saw it, we wanted to do a Yui to figure out what it was. Once again, I'm driving. My mom's like, what was that? And, you know, and I thought maybe she didn't see, but she saw it. My sister, we thought was asleep. So we were kind of thinking of doing a Yui. My sister's like, don't you do it. You just keep on going.
No, because you could hit it. What if you hit it and then what?
But I wanted to know what it was. I mean,
I still want to know what I saw, but I don't want to go looking for it. Now, I did one night. I did go out in a boat with some people one night in the Manchac Swamp to try to find it. But when you look for it, you can't find it. It's very strange. But that's weird.
I'll tell you what. We're going to dive a little deeper into this as soon as we get back from the break. I can tell y'all ain't watching time.
No,
yep.
See,
12 minutes ain't nothing, y'all. I'm telling you, 12 minutes is nothing.
Oh, and I forgot that I had oh, wow. Look at that.
Don't worry about it. Just bring it back in. We're rolling. We're on the money here. All
right, we're back. So, Allan, come on. You're our cryptoid guy. You're the animal guy.
Yeah.
You're the guy who did all the animal things. I mean, you're the guy we call. I mean, who are you going to call? You call Allan. So what do you think, Allan? I mean, silverback gorilla in the middle of Texas. What happens? What do you say about this?
I will relate a couple of related stories as well. Of course, out in West Texas, you have the legend of the leopard cats. Big felines out in the desert. Now we're back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s for this legend, and at the time nobody, this was the great cryptid out there. You'd be driving along out around Midland, Odessa, or further out as you headed further west, and as you head further west, as you drive towards Vegas, let's just say the scenery gets less and less and less. You got more sand, less trees, more cactus, flatter ground. It's really easy to get bored. Your mind can wander. You're just driving and driving and driving. On one particular trip, the infamous legendary leopard cat, we saw it running from way across the valley. I mean, we saw this thing for like 5 minutes. Ran all the way down through the valley, ran across the road, ran up the other side of the valley as we were driving down. And, of course, this is before we had camera phones and stuff. So, of course, the trick to a lot of this, when you think 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s, we just all weren't carrying cameras at the ready. You had to be a professional photographer to have a camera in your pocket, locked, loaded, and ready to take a picture.
Right.
And then you had to have the picture developed, and if it was moving, it was shaky, it was fuzzy. We didn't have the technology we've had the last 10 years. But people don't drive down these little forgotten highways and stuff as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the big, the Eisenhower project, the great interstates and stuff. So a lot of times you're not out on these little lonely highways, and you're not prepped and ready to record any evidence. Now, of course, I'm watching a Discovery Channel show in the 2000s because camera traps are now a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have trail cams looking for deer and that kind of stuff. Well, instead of staking out your cornfield, let's go stake out a wilderness area out in Arizona and accidentally get the picture of a jaguar. Oh, congratulations. There's a great big leopard cat. So
right. Well, yeah.
You and I have argued this in the past. When does a cryptid become a reality? And, for the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s, just because somebody didn't shoot one didn't mean they weren't out there. So, one of my early memories is this great big giant cat running for numerous minutes all the way across and then disappeared out the far side. Well, 25 years later, I'm watching the Discovery Channel, and they're going, oh, by the way, these things are here. So you get a little validation stamp on your cryptid sighting. Another childhood memory was visiting a ranch where the gentleman had the last remaining Texas wolves. He had them in captivity. And of course, I'm a little kid. I'm walking around, and I noticed one of the big doggies was out.
Oh, no.
So I went and told the dude, hey, one of your big doggies is out. Can I go play with it? And the guy turned dead white. I mean, just like, there's a what? So he's literally running over to the pens where the wolves are. And, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 wolves in the pens. So, kid, what did you see? So I'm like, no, come here. You got to come around this side. Now look right back there. You got another doggy right there. Well, guess what? It was a feral Texas wolf. Not supposed to exist. Not supposed to be there. Got drawn in by the scent of the others in the cages. Where'd it come from? No idea. So, a cryptid got made reality. So when we go to the swamp monster sightings and that kind of stuff.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we got to look at, though, is simulacra. What looks like something but may not be something.
Okay, well, what would you think that something might be, given the description of what I've given you, on both of those instances in which, in both cases, it was like a gray, almost like a wool-like matted, if anybody's had a poodle and didn't get it groomed fast enough, that's what it looked like. Dirty, like almost like wool. I mean, what would be your guess? What would be your educated guess? What would be the logical explanation for that creature?
Well, the problem is it's probably not that color fur. That's how it appeared in that lighting. So like if something was very light colored and it was wet, it would look very dark. So if you had something, as you said, very dirty, all covered and coated in something, now we can get that nice light color. And yes, you do have black bears that can be a cinnamon color, and you can even have albinos. So, can we get to the color? Yes. What you saw at 70 miles an hour in the dark is really hard to nail down. But I will tell you from, craziness in this world, people do dumb things. People have pets, and I air quote the word pets, that you should not have.
Oh, I know. Like a lion.
Like a lion or an otter or emus or stuff like that. Pablo Escobar had a herd of pet hippos. It wasn't until after they crashed his drug thing and arrested him that they run on the compound and found out dude's got like 12 African hippos.
Oh.
How would
I
you
wonder
like
what he was using them for.
You probably don't want to know. Because they don't like people. They do bad things to people.
Yeah. They're vicious.
So how would you like to have been the poor little Colombian guy that walks down there by the pond and sees a hippo in it?
Mm-mm.
I would not want to be that guy.
So, so the place of having an animal out of place and out of context makes it very, very scary. If you were driving down the road in Minnesota and a kangaroo bounded across the road, how on earth would you describe that? And especially if you weren't familiar with a kangaroo or how a kangaroo moved. There's no telling what kind of description you'd give it. So, what did you actually see? I'll freely tell you, you did see something. And you probably smelled something quite terrible, because an animal, especially out in the swamps, they have strong smells. They got stuff growing in that fur. They got critters, ticks, fleas, diseases, mange. Did you see something? Absolutely. Were you wise not to go back and bother it? Yes.
Well, yeah, it was terrifying.
You don't need to do that. But, I'll safely look at you dead in the eye and I'll say, I definitely believe you saw something. But until we could recreate that or go in and see the speed and the angle, and now what did your mind try to tell you? Because the human brain thinks in patterns. We don't like things we don't understand. So that's why people lost in the swamps see monsters everywhere. Watch any Disney movie as they turn a tree stump into a monster. And when you go back the next day of the daylight, it's just a tree stump. And I've seen some pretty scary, jacked up looking trees in the daylight. I can only imagine what they look like at night. So, the takeaway of this is, if you see something, can you safely get a better look? If you can't safely get a better look, guys, it's going to be a great, scary story. But it's going to be just that. It's just going to be a story of, until it can be investigated, it can be repeated, or you can find it, or you have some evidence. But the problem is, driving by someplace at 70 miles an hour, you're just going to get that quick look. And then you're by it so fast. Even things that we normally recognize. If a deer is at a funny angle and there's a street sign maybe behind it in your vision, now you have this weird shape coming up. that doesn't look normal, but it moves. You know, if you'd have driven by it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you've been like, oh, look, there's a deer in front of the Bob Evans sign. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, you see what I mean? At 2 o'clock in the morning, your mind is trying to make sense of what it sees. And, you know, if the buck and bass sign has got a deer on it with horns sticking out the top of the sign, and you see a deer dash in front of the sign at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, my God.
But you know it's a deer.
I saw, well, but I just saw a 12-foot tall deer.
You know it's a deer.
Yes, but it's a 12-foot tall deer. It's monster deer.
No, it's still a deer.
But if you had to guess it, so you're saying that this could have been a bear. This could have been a bear standing on its hind legs, because bears do that, right?
They do that. You know, I've driven by bears before, out in, you know, going through the Smoky Mountains, and I find it odd.
Right?
Right. You know, I do find it kind of odd that when you start going by, they will stand up and look at your vehicle.
We don't see bears down here so often, though. That's the thing.
Well, but they do show up is the problem. It's a known creature in the area. So barring seeing that, you know, Dinga got loose from Bob's private zoo, and as we've all seen from, what's the movie, Tiger, whatever, what's the horrible movie Tiger right now? Tiger. We've all seen Tiger from that. Very irresponsible people have really big animals.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
I would hate to think in Lynda's case that somebody lost a gorilla.
I thought about it in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we all know Texas I-10.
Yeah, stranger things have happened.
I-10 is a very strange place in general.
It is. Especially in the middle of the night, in the wee hours. That's, you know.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible. But for those listening,
freeze frame for a second.
What's that?
Freeze frame for a second. You've been rolling for 26 minutes. When did y'all want to end the broadcast?
Okay, we're going to end it now.
It's like, nobody but Allan's using a clock, is he?
I know, because I can't come and walk. Okay.
Well, I thought you were going to be the runner.
I'm trying, but, you know, I'm getting run over.
Right,
it's like, never mind.
We're going to kill it here. I'm going to edit it anyway.
Yes.
All right, well, we're just about out of time, so if you've got a story, please send it to us, scarystories@yahoo.com. Also, go and join our group on Facebook, Scary Stories with Kalila, and join us again for another episode next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.